Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. My name is Lida, and I'm the current Vice Chair of Young Architects Forum. For those of you who don't know, YAF is a group that aims to serve emerging professionals. That's usually through opportunities to network, learning opportunities, and encouraging development. If any of you are interested to get involved, you can find more information on the AA Nova's website. I just wanted to say that this whole lecture wouldn't be possible without the EP component grant that we received from the College of Fellows. Um, for those who aren't emerging professionals, I just wanted to make you aware that this lecture is worth one learning unit. And if you have signed up with your AA number, you should see that reflected in a couple weeks. And if you haven't, you can either leave your full email and AA number in the chat, or you can share it to Lauren, and we will share her email in the chat for everyone if they want to send the AA number for that. So this is the first lecture in the series Invisible Frames. The series will showcase speakers who have pulled from their background and experience to better serve their communities through their unique perspective on design. As the first presentation of the series, the session will focus on underrepresented design through a cultural frame of reference. No one embodies that better than our first speaker, Teri Canada. We're honored to have her speak tonight. Teri is the founding principal as well as project manager at Evoke Design in North Carolina. After graduating from North Carolina State University, Teri became one of the first 5 African-American women to become a registered architect in the state of North Carolina. Teri has then gone on to wear many hats, including an insightful mentor to young architects, the appointed Firms Diversity Council at Perkins & Will, a member and previous panelist of NOMA, and she continues to demonstrate her commitment to elevating communities around her as a Durham Smart Initiative Advisory Board member and many more. Before I hand it off to Teri, I just wanted to say, during the lecture, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave it in the chat, and we'll have a couple minutes at the end to ask Teri some questions. And with that, I'm honored to hand it over to Teri.
Thank you, Laura. I'm honored to be here. Thank you and your team for inviting me to speak today. This is a message that is near and dear to my heart, just talking about my path through architecture and how what I do today really reflects my path in life. So I appreciate the opportunity to do this. And I think I have some slides that are going to queue up in just one second, but let me give you an overview of what I'll be speaking about today. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I do what I do, and that starts off with my future, which is my daughter. And so I'll talk a little bit about why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'll talk a bit about my past, my background, my early understanding of what design is, a path to architecture, and this is a lot, I know. My founding of Evoke with my partners, and then what we all can do in the future to really encourage inclusivity in design and by design. And so this lecture was designed a while ago before COVID-19, and it was designed for a creative group in Raleigh. They really wanted to hear about my thoughts and ideas on inclusivity specifically. And so in light of everything that has happened this year, including all of the social justice, all of the things with COVID, everything that has happened this year, the election, we felt like this presentation would be a good one to just sort of go ahead and present to you all today. So inclusivity by design, of course, that's a play on words, and that's how I want to live my life, and hopefully you'll live your life that way after seeing this. Next slide. Again, I'm Teri Canada, co-founder of Evoke Studio Architecture in Durham, North Carolina, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But this is a photo of my daughter and some of her friends, and really looking at her friends and looking at how she relates to people. I think it's important. I think, you know, looking at her, I like to take a look at what the world will look like in 5, 10, 15 years from now. And what are we doing to prepare for that new world? Inclusivity is important in a world that is becoming increasingly diverse. You know, it's important to hear from everyone. Every voice is important to us. Everyone is welcome. Everyone's voice is heard, and everyone has equal access. That's our goal, I feel, for the future. Next. And so the words I just stated, you can go to the next slide. So giving you a little bit about my background. My parents were divorced when I was very young, and my mom and I moved to Cumberland Courts, which is an affordable housing complex in Greensboro. My mom worked at A&T. She also went to school there, and she was actually there during the height of the civil rights movement. She was there when the Greensboro Four were there. She was there and part of the sit-ins. And so just hearing her stories about that time and how that impacted her, it certainly impacted my life. And then also just living where we did, I'll get a little bit more detail into that a little bit later, but you know, she was really about, if you want to go to the next slide, about how, you know, everyone is welcome. Everyone should be treated like you would want to be treated. And so that sort of stuck with me as a young person and really applies to my life today. If you want to go to the next slide. Just a little bit, I'm going to hold it here and talk to you a little bit about my early understanding of architecture. As a young African-American girl, and I really didn't know what architecture was, but there were several things that really came to my mind that sparked my interest in design. The first one is, if you remember, I just told you I was raised early on in an affordable housing complex, and of course you've got cinder block walls and you know the cheapest material you can find, and you're thinking to yourself, you know, what is that like? But the funny part is that a lot of our neighbors, and including ourselves, had really transformed their spaces based on their own personalities. They were telling their story through the way they designed and laid out their furniture. And so each space was distinctly different. And I thought to myself, wow, it's so weird that you can go into rooms that are exactly the same, but you feel different in each one. So that was um, something that stood out to me early on. When I was also very young in elementary school, I remember going to a school that was a traditional school, had older buildings, but they had just put on an expansion there, a new addition. And it was an amazing space to me. This was in the 70s and had these huge soaring ceilings. It had a mezzanine inside, and it was large enough that it could hold 3 different classes in it. So it's very casual, open space, really encouraged play and thought and creativity. And at that young age, I was just amazed at how different that learning environment was from the traditional spaces that I'd been in. And I thought to myself, I really want to someday, you know, influence folks in that same way. And then also my father, who I said divorced my mom, or they got divorced, sorry, early on. He was still in the area, and he owned a construction company with his brother. So it was a small construction company. But I used to go on site and watch them take small pieces of material and build these huge structures. And for a young mind, I didn't quite understand how it all came together, but I could see them building and creating spaces out of these little pieces. And as I grew up, I started to, you know, figure out, you know, what this was, what is architecture. And so after going through, you know, high school, I got into NC State. You know, I enjoyed my experience there. It was really design heavy. I really tried to open you up and really think about new ways to think on design. And at the time, I was only one of 5 African American students in my class, which was a little odd for me. I'd come from, you know, schools that had a mixture of folks there. And then, of course, the staff and the faculty, you know, also reflected that there were very few African Americans there. But, you know, I was able to get through the program and learn a lot and really enjoy, you know, folks that I came in contact with uh, and learned, you know, what my voice was in architecture. I was one of the first African American women to complete the 5th year program uh, at NC State School of Design, and then you know, really was able to hopefully open that door and allow a flood of folks. I know since then a lot of young African American women and men have come through that program, and so I'm excited to have been one of the first that sort of allowed that to happen. As soon as I graduated from NC State, there was a recession. It was in 1996. And instead of saying, oh, I don't want to, I'm going to go out and do something else, I really wanted to learn the profession of architecture. So one of the local architecture firms that was doing a lot of work with healthcare hired me. And I went there and ended up staying for about 10 years there. And really learned to hone some skills, including client management skills, really learned a lot about the profession, and that would come into play later in my career. I was licensed in 2005, which seems like a lot of time between graduation and licensure. However, back then, there were no programs to get you prepped for licensure in school, and you were to learn all that when you got out of school. And in addition to that, the firm I worked for did a lot of renovation work. And so I was, after doing a lot of work for them, I would have to sort of on the side or, on an extra time, get out there and really look at other buildings and building types to get the information that I needed to sit for the exam. And so at the time, I was number 5 of African American women in the state of North Carolina to become licensed, and one of the first 100 African American women in the nation to be licensed. So I'm proud to be a part of that group, and I'm proud that those numbers are growing, and I'm going to do everything I can in my power to make sure that those numbers continue to grow. So once I was licensed, I met Phil Freelon. And at the time, his firm was growing by leaps and bounds, and he was about to interview for the Museum for African American History and Culture in DC. And so as I came onto their team, they were going after that project, and there were several other high-profile cultural projects that they were working on getting at the time. And so it was amazing to me. I was almost at the point of maybe switching careers by the time I met him, because I had been in healthcare architecture, which is a great lucrative career path, but something in me, was missing. And so when I met Phil and saw the work he was doing, that really sparked something in me. I got excited about my career and was really excited to come on as a project manager for some pretty significant projects in that office. One of the projects is on the screen, and that's Emancipation Park. Emancipation Park is in Houston, Texas, and we were asked to come out and take a look at the park and see how we could transform it. If you could turn to the next slide, please. We spent 7 years of engagement sessions, 7 years of design, and finally construction to get this project completed. And so let me just give you a little bit about the history of the project. It was founded in 1872 by 4 former enslaved African Americans and some of the community members. So when the Emancipation Proclamation was released, the folks around Galveston and Houston did not hear that had happened. And 2 years later was when they were finally freed. And they came to Houston in droves from Galveston and settled here on this park site. And it's a 10-acre park site near downtown Houston. It's the oldest park in Houston, and until 1960s, this was the only pool that African Americans could use. So it had a rich history and culture, if you could turn to the next slide, that we really wanted to explore. And so you can see some of the engagement sessions that we had with the folks and really learning about, number one, what their community need. Number two, how could we highlight the history and culture of this park? And number three, how does that link together with the surrounding community? And so if you can see in your lower left, we came up with this sort of promenade that had many different features on it that sort of highlighted the history of the park. That promenade began to stretch out into the programming for the site, and you can see where recreation and swimming is highlighted towards the front of the site, and play and sort of more informal spaces are in the back. And then how does that link to the community? Well, we determined that that front area would become the gateway into the park, a built gateway. And then the back side would be really a commemorative sort of contemplative space. Next slide. So I don't know if you recall from the slide we were just on, a lot of the houses around that community were small, sort of shotgun style houses with sort of a rusted metal roof. And so we decided to take that rusted metal look and apply it to some of the buildings on the site, really to sort of blend in and sort of pick up on what was happening around the community. And as you can see, there's a lot of overhangs on the structures, and that's because, well, number one of the things we had here was the front porch, and you'll see that pop up throughout the next few slides. Also, to provide outdoor shading. It's really hot and humid in Houston, and so as much shading as we could put on the site, we did that for them. So you're looking at the new recreation center that was built. The existing recreation center was in the far off here with the Emancipation Park sign. It's the old 1920s building. It was not adequate, did not have a regulation size court for them. And so we turned that space into a community center, which was much needed. If you can go to the next slide, please. And so this is inside of that gymnasium. It's regulation size, something that the community really wanted and needed. Next slide. So this is the Blessings Theater. This is on the back side of that community center that I spoke to you about. The funny part about this is it was an open theater to the outside and to the inside. We've closed it off with similar to a garage type door, but during the 70s, they closed it off and turned it into a mechanical space. And when we saw this, we were like, oh my gosh, no, we have to open it back up. We have to do whatever it takes to, make it what it used to be. And it works out perfectly because they really needed an intimate performing space. It works out perfectly with the trees. They act as a canopy, and you can just sort of sit and casually listen to music or watch a small performance from the neighborhood kids. We also had a program of a larger stage, which is, it would be to your right next to the sort of rust-colored building. There's a huge stage that will be for larger performances. So we were excited to pull out history that was there that was lost. You can go to the next slide. And just quickly through this, these are what we're calling the front porch pavilions. And so at each one, there's a specific place that can overlook areas in the park. One that's not shown here is a playground area and a water splash area where the grandparents in the neighborhood were saying they really wanted a space that they could sit, they could do their quilt, and they can watch the kids, and they can talk. And so that's all that sort of theme resonated throughout this process of front porch. And so each space was meant to be a welcoming area for folks to just enjoy. But that one space, and I wish I had a photo of it, was meant to be a rocking chair front porch for the folks in the community that really wanted to keep an eye out on the kids while they were playing. Next slide. And the one last thing I want to say about Emancipation Park is this is a gateway feature that was designed. Edwin Harris actually designed this piece. And, it was really meant to be, number one, a sculpture and a celebration of the 4 founders. But it was also meant to be a piece that they can use every Juneteenth. And if you don't know, Juneteenth was started at this particular park in Houston. And this is the original celebration. And so what they do every year is they string either a rope or a chain across this. There's little hooks in this that you can't see. And they celebratorily chop it off and have everyone pass through at the beginning. So it's sort of like a processional. And it's a beautiful thing, and it was a great thing to be a part of. So you can go on to the next slide. Now, this project, we did at Freeline, Edwin Harris and myself. We, like I said, spent 7 years on the project, and we thought, wow, that was amazing. We should do this on our own. At the time, the Freeline group was transitioning into Perkins and Will, which is a great firm, but they weren't doing the same thing that Freeline was doing. And so we really wanted to keep that Freeline legacy going. And so we started our own firm with the intent to really do a lot of cultural, civic, and library projects. Next slide. And that's a shot of our office, and this is the inside of our office. And Evoke, we mean by that, evoke to purposely draw out something hidden, latent, or reserved. So we really want to look at who our client is and sort of bring out something that they didn't realize was there. We celebrate their history, their culture, their DNA, and really showcase that in our architecture. Like I said, we started out thinking, hey, we're gonna, this is what we're gonna do. And I'll show you how that sort of went in a different direction, but sort of kept that same flavor. If you go to the next slide, please. Let's see. So let me go back. Actually, I thought this was a different slide. I apologize. So Billy, Edwin, and myself, Billy Askey, we are the three partners of Evoke. We started the firm in 2016. Again, we all three came from the Freeline Group and really wanted to continue that legacy. And so the projects you're about to see are projects that, one was our first project. The second one is the first built project, and the third one was our first award-winning project. And so if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so this is part of, it's part of a project that we worked on in Oxford, North Carolina. And I think a couple of slides are missing. That's okay. I have some information here that I can pull up on it. It used to be a campus for African-American children to come and learn, get the high quality education in the the late 1800s, early 1900s. Sorry, let me just get my bearings here. Okay, sorry, this is Mary Potter Academy. And so what happened is they purchased land, 20 acres in Oxford, North Carolina, to build a school for young African Americans who could not get an education otherwise because of segregation and other reasons. And so the staff, the students, and faculty actually built all of the buildings on this campus, which is really impressive. And it was impressive to learn the whole history about what happened here. Now, since then, and since the 1970s, when integration happened, a lot of the buildings were torn down, and then a new school was built for everyone, which is a great thing. But of course, we don't want to lose the history of what happened here. So their board of alumni came to us and basically said, there are 3 buildings still left. We want to do something for the community and something to celebrate the history of this place. And so there was a gym left, an industrial arts building, and an old house, which was the Chancellor's house. The Chancellor's house was turned into a museum before we came on board. So really the industrial arts building and the gymnasium were our focus. And so we took a look at, number one, what could happen for these buildings in a new community, and how can they be linked into a new campus with all of the buildings missing and other buildings infilling that have nothing to do with the campus. And so you can see the sketch here is really showing those connections. If you can go to the next slide. So the gym that you see here in this rendering is transformed into an event space. You can have weddings and different events there. And it's a way to generate income for the community. Next slide. You can see multiple shots here, images of both the Industrial Arts Center, which would be a community-based resource center. It used to be where they worked on cars, the shop, that sort of thing, different trades, and now it's going to be a resource center for the community, transformed into classrooms, conference rooms, and things of that nature, and really sort of interweaving images of what was there before, reflections of the past throughout the building. Next slide. We also talked to them about including a farmer's market, and that would be sort of a corner piece that tied everything together. A great place for folks to come and, the community to get together at certain times during the week, getting fresh produce and really maybe some arts and crafts, but just something to activate that corner. And they were very happy to see something like this for that community. Next slide. So the next one is the North Carolina Central TV studio project. And this one is interesting. As I said to you before, we were focused on cultural civic projects. This one was not even in our wheelhouse, not even close. But the owner came to us and said, you know, you guys are a small firm. We just need some equipment to be replaced, and that's it. But us being us, we went in there and said, hey, wait a minute. Let's take a look at your space. Number one, you've got, if you look at the lower existing lobby shot, no one in the lobby could tell that this was a TV station. And so we're like, you need to open this up. You need to make folks excited about what's going on here. If you see in the middle picture, that was their existing studio space. Basically a large classroom with curtains up, you know, to recreate different scenes, and then their existing control room. And we're like, this can't be all that you guys want. You want more than this. We can help you dream of what you want, and we can help you make that a reality. So you can go to the next slide. And you can see here, we started to shift things around. We allowed visibility into the space from outside, and we really thought about the layout of the TV studio. You can go to the next slide. This was the ribbon cutting, and this was at that front entrance. You can see that you can get glimpses of the entrance into the studio, and then if you come around, you can see actually into the studio. But this is the chancellor at the ribbon cutting. He's excited about what's going on. When we first started the project, they only had a small amount of money. We put together a design rendering package that showed them what it could be. And the chancellor saw it, and he started to get on board and started to put money towards this project. And so it's one of those things where you have a vision, you take the owner along on that vision, and they can see themselves and their stories reflected in that process. And so this is one of those projects. Next slide. And you can see some of the renderings mixed in with some of the real shots of the studio. The students are just so proud to be in this studio. It rivals the local TV stations, and you know, it's something that means a lot to me, because you've just transformed these students' careers, their lives. They are in the state-of-the-art studio that they never would have had before, and they can go out and get, you know, those jobs in those big studios now and feel comfortable in them. Next slide. And this is what the main studio looks like. So the thought here was we were playing off their mascot, which is an eagle, the eagle's wings, and really giving them something that, you know, just exudes professionalism, exudes excitement. And I can tell you that, you know, they're really excited about this project. Next slide. Pettigrew State Park. This is our first award-winning project, and the project I just showed you also recently won an award we're very proud of. But Pettigrew State Park is, again, something we had never thought about doing. It is a park project, but it's out in the middle of nowhere. Most people in the state of North Carolina don't even know about this park. They wanted something that would bring people in and really draw them into this park. As you can see, it's a heavily I would say wet site. There's a lake nearby, and they built this boardwalk system throughout so that you can walk through the trees and experience the nature without having to deal with the land, and without disturbing the trees and without disturbing the land. And I think that's really important. Next slide. So this project, we were asked to build a visitor center that would teach young kids coming to this space, and all people really, about the area. There's an existing plantation called Somerset Place. There's farms all around, and this place is known for camping and the lake. Next slide. And so we were really trying to play on that. This is just a model and a section cut through the site. Even though the building is what we would see as a modern building in the middle of farmland, what it really does is it expands the space, the usable space for this small structure. They wanted to do a lot with this, but they could only afford a 6,500 square foot building. And so we used the roof plane to extend the porch out into the site. You can go to the next slide. And we also elevated the structure so that we didn't have as big of an impact on the land around it. And there's some boardwalks that connect to the existing boardwalks that you saw earlier. This was in the early stages of design. I mean, even before schematic design. So a lot of detailing is not there, but just the overall thought and idea was to celebrate the surrounding area, which is their history and their culture, which was different than mine, but just learning about, you know, what this place is about, and able to translate that, be able to translate that into a design that is exciting for them. And next slide. And again, that porch comes into play again, as you saw in Emancipation Park. That was very important to us, and this as well. This is doing something different, though. Again, it's expanding your usable space to the outdoors. Next slide. Okay, so in addition to our architecture, we aspire to positively impact our communities, and we do that in more ways than just engagement on projects. Next slide. We invite young students into our office all the time, many different programs in our area. This group actually came all the way from the east coast of North Carolina, the Greenville area, just to see what we were doing. They have a program for young girls that teaches about professions that aren't normally known to folks in their area, and then also aren't really seen by young girls sometimes as something that they can go into. But this is just a shot of our studio and our team engaging with them. Next slide. We spent the day with them, talking to them about our different projects. We walked them through several exercises that were designed specifically for people who are interested in architecture. They could build structures and different things like that. Next slide. And we also have local groups. One of them is it's a program, it's the Emily Case Center, which they take youth that may fall through the cracks, and they try to encourage them to look at different professions and do a little bit more after hours, after school, to excel and do well in their courses. And so we were a part of that program and brought those folks in to really understand what architecture is all about. Next slide. So we really feel like we need to reach back and propel forward by revealing what they revealing what they did not know was within them. So in other words, they, when they come to our sessions, they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I liked that, or wow, this is really cool. I may want to look into that later. We teach them to use their voice to tell their stories. Everyone has a story, and that storytelling is in our architecture as well as, when we do these engagement sessions with young folks. We give them access to experiences they would not normally have. And that's very important because, as a young girl, again, I didn't even know what architecture was. I enjoyed design. I knew, aspects of architecture, but I didn't know what that was. And if I had had the opportunity to go into someone's office and learn more about it, that would have put me that much more ahead once I did go to architecture school. Next slide. So again, I thank you so much for listening to this presentation. It's a little shorter than I thought it was going to be. I think some of the slides were removed. I apologize for that. But what I did want to say before we actually end is that I really think that diversity in everything that we do is important. I think it's important to have the diversity of thought. I think it strengthens what we do. It strengthens, our design. Having more voices in there than one is always going to enhance what you're doing. And so what I like to say to you all is, in order for you to have more, or for us to have more inclusive society, I encourage you to mentor young folks that don't perhaps look like you, and help them along and understand what architecture is about. Invite people into your creative spaces and show them what is possible. I like to do that because I reflect a lot of the kids that don't get that. But even if you don't look like me, or don't come from the place that I come from, anyone can sort of engage and help with this. And think about how to make amenities and experiences accessible to all people. And that means if you're a part of a group, or if you're part of an organization and you look around and you see everyone looks like you, then there's a problem there. I think you need to be the catalyst, or the person who pushes for more inclusivity in your spaces. And so again, I thank everyone for listening to me. I hope this was helpful to you. And now open to questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teri. That was very inspiring to hear, and it's very inspiring to hear how every project kind of had a transformative effect on the community that it was in, and that seems like it's such a propelling factor in all your projects and in all the actions that you kind of take in, depending on which phase it's in. We'd like to open up the floor for any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or put any questions in the chat. In the meantime, I wanted to kind of take advantage of talking to you right now and kind of asking you some questions that I have. I think one really interesting thing that you talk about is mentorship. And I kind of like to hear you expand on that. Like, what advice would you have in terms of where to begin to reach out to these mentors? Because like you said, a lot of these people don't even know. I know when I was younger, I didn't know what architecture was, what design was either, until I saw somebody who did it and learned about it more. So what advice do you have for people, and how would you find somebody who's not already involved in design and kind of begin to spread that awareness?
Okay, so in our area, we have some programs that connect with schools that have an outreach. That's through our AIA, but NOMA, which is a national organization, of course, many of you guys know, has Project Pipeline and what is it, Hip Hop Architecture. So both of those really reach out to folks that wouldn't normally know anything about architecture, usually in underserved communities. And so we're getting the word out that way. We're doing that locally as well. Our North Carolina NOMA chapter is working on that. But if AIA Virginia doesn't have something like that, I would tap into what NOMA is doing. I'm sure you've got local NOMA chapters that could help with that. Or you could, one of you all in YAF or anyone in your organization could start something. But it was really about engaging local schools, local community centers, places like that. And usually they are, really ready for someone like raising their hands, like, yeah, we would love to have someone come in and speak, or yes, we'd like to take a group to your office. There's so many folks out there who probably would be interested if they knew something like that was available. That's mentoring on that level, but there's also mentoring younger folks than you in the profession. And a lot of times it's hard for folks to come up to someone who's older or who's been in the business for a while. But if you're younger and really want to propel your career, it's good to engage someone that has been there for a while and been experienced in that. I had a couple of folks while I was at Freelon Group who I considered mentees, or I mentored them, but it was just more of a casual thing. It wasn't formal, and really just developing that relationship with someone who can help you on your career path. I think it's very helpful. But you as a young architect could also help folks that are younger than you that are just getting into the business, and just really I don't know if some of your local universities has any programs where you can sort of reach out to folks that are just coming out of school. But there's so many opportunities, and I could go on and on about it, but I find that each one has been positive. There's not been any sort of negative pushback from anyone that we've tried to engage. So yeah, I'm hopeful that you can do the same thing. And if you need my help, I'm here to help. Yeah. Other questions?
I got one, Laura. So, hi, Teri.
Hey,
this is Joe. So one of the things that we've been looking at here in our chapter in Northern Virginia is potential barriers to our profession being more diverse and sort of more reflective of the community at large and the clients that we're all trying to serve. And we've had a number of discussions internally, workshops looking at outside resources or some of the surveys that have been taken of our own profession. But I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are, either from your own experience or from other people that you know that have been barriers that are keeping people perhaps from joining the profession or being more interested in it, and essentially something that we could identify and then work to solve.
Sure, that's a great question. So, well, number one, the first barrier is just getting the word out about who we are and what we do to folks that wouldn't normally have it. But the other barrier And I was just talking with a young person who's in high school. She's looking at universities right now for architecture, and she is afraid to go to a majority school because she doesn't want to be the only person in her class that looks like her. And we're talking through that with her, but I think some of the barriers are, okay, you go to school and no one else looks like you, and you're sort of singled out and all alone. And just having a program that where the staff and faculty is diverse, so that when folks come in, they feel welcome, and they can feel welcome with anyone. I don't mean to say that you have to have African Americans for African Americans and that sort of thing, but I'm saying that if your school looks like the community or looks like the folks that want to apply, that helps. And then going into architecture, all of you know that right now about 50% or more of women are in school, but that same group doesn't make it out into the real world and become licensed. And so there's a disconnect there. There's something going on there that needs to be addressed. I don't know if it's, the mentoring is not as strong as it could be once they're out and in the real world. I don't know if there is an agenda. When I was coming through, I was the only person in my firm, that first firm that I worked at, but they actually encouraged me, they helped me to develop, and they pushed me to become licensed. So I think that's sort of a different situation. I think a lot of times things slip through the cracks, and people, don't lose interest, but they don't feel like they're being supported. And so we need to figure out how to be a little bit more supportive to everyone and make them feel like, yes, you can do it. You can get licensed, you can be a contributing member in this profession. So yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's really about making sure that they understand that this profession is here for them, that they are celebrated in the role of an architect. That's that's my thought on that.
Thanks. One other thing I'll say is you're to be congratulated on it, but I would say it's also a little bit astounding that you were like in the top 5
I know.
African American women, and this is not 50 years ago, right?
Exactly.
You and I were in school together, so
Exactly.
it's not that long ago. So it's something to be certainly you're to be congratulated on, but it's also a major wake up call that we're not really where we need to be yet. But
I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to take advantage of this because I have a couple more questions. I did kind of want to pick your brain about that transition between working to Perkinsonville and then kind of starting your own firm. That transition, I'm sure, must have been. But if you had one piece of advice for people kind of looking to go through that transition, what would you say to them?
So I think when we started, we didn't know what we were getting into, and I think that was the best thing, because if we had, we probably wouldn't have done it. I would say go for it if you have a strong sense of who you are and what you want to contribute to, the architectural world. If you feel strongly about that, then go for it. We, had some clients that we worked with prior to starting our own firm, and we didn't necessarily bring those clients with us, but they heard about us, and a lot of people supported us as we started. Phil Freelon was at our opening. The mayor of the city of Durham was at our opening. We felt supported, and like people really wanted us to succeed. However, having all that support and then actually having work is something else. And so that first year was very difficult, building the clientele, building the projects that we wanted to work on, getting the word out about who we were and what we were about. And I think part of that was, again, we were chasing projects that would have been museums, libraries, that sort of thing. And we decided who we are is, a firm that wants to transform projects for our clients. And once we figured that out, everything opened up. And once we started to do great things for our clients, number one, those same clients wanted us back to do something similar on campus, and then other universities around heard what we were doing, and they decided to invite us to work on projects. We also were able to win some proposals and awarded projects through public work. So you should study what is required to keep that workflow going before you jump out there on your own. You know, my experience at Freelon and Perkins & Will allowed me to really run a project. So it was like I was running my own business within that firm, meeting with clients, setting up the team, making sure that the project was profitable, that sort of thing. I had already gone through. And I would say to any of you, if you're at a larger firm or a smaller firm, project management sometimes is a dirty word. It's the person over, over there, doing certain things. They're not actually necessarily drafting or drawing or whatever, but the project manager can do whatever the project manager wants. If they want to draw, design, whatever. But what they can do is be knowledgeable about, the profession, about what it takes to get clients, maintain clients, make sure that there's a good cash flow going through, because you learn all of that to make sure the project in your office is successful. And then you learn what you can do outside of that to make your own firm successful. So I think it was just one of those things where we were just certain before we left that this is what we wanted, and we learned a lot of business things as we went. We got a lot of advice from folks who weren't in architecture that told us about how to manage you know the business and who we needed to contact to do all the other things like insurance and taxes and all that kind of stuff, things that we didn't know about, and that has been very helpful. So that was my experience in starting my own business. It was helpful to have two other people with me. It wasn't just me jumping out there on my own. We played upon our strengths and really were able to together build something I think is great. So I would say do it if you have strong feelings about it and you feel like you have enough information to move forward. I would totally tell everyone to do it if they wanted to.
Okay, I think it looks like we've got a couple of questions in the chat. We've got, can you talk about any projects or design decisions that have had positive yet unexpected impacts in the surrounding communities?
Okay. So again, for us to have just started, like I said, our first built project was the TV studio. So I can only speak about the impact of that. In my previous life at Freelon, I would say Emancipation Park really was a transformative project for the community, good and bad. The good side is that the community is thriving. A lot of businesses moved to the area. The bad side is when the businesses moved to the area, and so did the condos, and now we're looking at an issue of keeping the park, the history and the culture of the area the same, with but allowing other folks to come in. I think it's a strong community. I don't think gentrification is going to happen, but it's about allowing the park to be celebrated and continue to be the heart of the community. So that was really transformative for us. And so because we haven't had anything else built, we're about to have something else built, but we haven't had anything else built since the TV studio. I can't really speak to the transformation of the community that we're in. I can tell you that what we've designed so far has been impactful just in what people have seen, like the community buzz about some of the designs. Right now we're working on Windsor Chavis, which is a large project in Greensboro. It's a large community center / recreation center / library / park. And it's going to have a huge impact. And me being from Greensboro, I'm very proud to be a part of the project, and I know what it's going to mean to that area because it's the same area that I grew up in. It's going to play a big role. And as we have gone through the design process, learning things that I didn't know about my own community has really sort of been implanted in me, and I can take that with me. And then just engagement with them and showing them what their community can be already has had some transformation or transformative qualities to it. So even though it hasn't been built yet and will be built soon, I know that it has impacted the community already. Yeah.
Great. And then another is, do you have any advice for advocating for universities to become more diverse? I know Virginia Tech NOMA has put out a statement/petition of sorts to advocate for this that many alumni had signed. Is there anything else we can do on the professional side to, kind of encourage diversity along faster?
Right. I think it, goes directly to leaderships of the program of those universities. I know at NC State when I was in school, most of the professors didn't look like me. And then the leadership also, but they were great. And I'm not saying that, but there's a new person who was in school when I was there named David Hill. And he really is, he's looking at opportunities. He's looking to the professional community for folks to come in and teach courses to teach studios that are people of color. And Edwin Harris of our firm is one of the professors there. For Shay Height, who is a young up-and-coming African-American woman architect, teaches studio there. And then there's multiple folks around, and I've taught one of the courses there. It was just a guest appearance, but it was about the profession of architecture. And so I think he has strategically tried to include more people of color in the overall sort of curriculum and school environment. I think those leaders at other universities need to hear that and need to understand how important it is. And they're the ones that it starts from the top, down. They need to understand that that's necessary and important, and that they need to start engaging folks maybe in the professional community who never thought that they were going to be teaching anything, to come in and at least engage, if not teach, and welcome alumni back to teach who are interested in design. I think it's important, and I think you just need to keep pushing. Again, the leadership at these universities. Yeah.
Great. And then looks like one other one. What are some tools that can be used in communicating with communities facing gentrification, for example, like here in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. Boy, that's a really tough question, because whenever you build something, people will come, and then those folks bring other people, and it just turns into this vicious cycle. I'm in Durham, and it has been mostly an African-American, well, majority African-American community. It's now, I think, almost 50-50 split, with a lot of Northerners coming in and people building up sites. And once they build up condos and these retail spaces, then folks are drawn in and pushing other folks out. That is a really difficult question, or it's not something that we take lightly, and it's something that we in our office, because we are located in downtown Durham, take very seriously. I think it's going to take more than just design, of course, some form of change in laws, legislature, whatever. It's going to take folks like us being on committees and boards that make decisions on what's happening in the community. The only thing we can do as designers on our end so far is really engage the community, try to build something that is important to that community specifically, that's not necessarily going to draw others in, but it's going to highlight and celebrate what they're doing. And if folks want to come in and visit, they can. But really trying to keep that community intact and building something that is going to strengthen the community, as opposed to make it so that others are attracted and push the community away. It's a difficult balance, because we all, especially designers and architects, want to see spaces be the best that they can be, without harming, what's there already. So I don't know what the true answer is, but hopefully I have given some ideas about where to move forward. And I would love to continue that conversation, because we need to continue to talk about it. I don't know, what are you guys doing, in DC, that could help change that? Is it just a lost cause there, or what's going on?
I don't know anything particular that we're doing. I know there's been a lot of pushback on the development down at the wharf because, you know, that was a pretty historically, you know, Black neighborhoods. It's all kind of Southwest. And then, you know, even expanding upon that, now they've done a lot more development in an area known as Anacostia, which is, you know, pretty,
Yes.
you know, I'm sure you're aware of that, pretty historically Black neighborhood. So, you know, they're, you know, you've got developers coming in and trying to really, you know, revive those areas, but then, yeah, you are pushing out, you know, a lot of the residents that have lived there all their lives. So, you know, it'd be interesting to hear maybe from other people what can be done, but I know I haven't heard much on, you know, what people are doing other than there's just been a lot of pushback on all this development that continues to push people out. And then, you know, where do those people go? And if you're saying you're providing affordable housing, you know, how affordable is it really? You know, what are we basing those values on? So.
That's right. Yeah, we're having that same issue here with affordable housing, and that's like the buzzword now the mayor is using. And again, what is affordable? Because what they're claiming is affordable is not affordable to many people. And so, you know, it's like they're just trying to check a box or whatever. And so it's disappointing. Does anyone else have a thought or opinion on that?
Yeah, Simone and Terry, I was going to say about our recent YAF conference. So this is at the state level and focused on designing with empathy. And I think a few of the speakers there were talking about or echoing the same things that you said, Terry, of the importance of engaging the community, where perhaps even the assignment that you were given didn't include engaging the community, but the architects insisted on it and said, well, this is what we need to do to make this work. And if you do that, as what we were hearing from some of the other speakers, it starts to let the community members know that design is actually for them also. Like this is not something that happens to other people, and or you know, design, and because that can be a barrier even in this area in DC, is the idea that, well, once something is designed, then that automatically means it's not for me.
Right.
And so I think what you're talking about really it is a start to overcoming that, so people just get more connected with it.
Yeah, I agree. Always communicating, informing folks, I think is a good start to that. And you're right, a lot of the ideas and thoughts are, hey, this shiny new building, it doesn't look like it's meant for me, so I can't be included there. We need to change that mentality as well. So, yeah. Great. This has been, these questions are awesome. Does anyone else have other questions?
Yeah, I'm not seeing any others, so.
Okay.
Hi guys, my name is Wonder. So kind of following up on what was previously said, I know like specifically in a lot of the areas in DC, being a umpteenth generation native of the area, a lot of the Black neighborhoods have kind of been erased. And a lot of the times what's ended up happening is that we do create this beautiful architecture, but we end up erasing the existing culture that is present. And the one thing I loved about your presentation is that, and even the things that you do at your firm, is that you keep the culture that is already pre-existed in that area and just amplify it into a new, more modern feel. And I think as in really dealing with gentrification, it's a communication of what is existing in that neighborhood or what's existing in that area, and how do you express it or get the people involved to be able to tell you how to express what their area is.
Right.
And I guess that's really where the root of my question was coming, is like, what are these tools that you can use to, because in a lot of cases, there's a barrier between race, age, and different backgrounds. So what are certain tools that I guess you have used in your own area to kind of help bridge those gaps?
All right. So when we start a project, we like to start the engagement process by saying, you know, we're not coming in here with our own thoughts and ideas about your community. You guys are part of the design process and we want to hear from you. And that sort of takes down that first barrier, that first layer of, oh, these guys are just coming in here and doing engagement just to say they did it. Then we start to work with them in a series of exercises, and the first one usually is about the first one is sort of like looking at the larger vision. So developing a vision that everyone is excited about and can champion is our main goal for engagement. And so that first few sessions, we ask them to bring in either objects or photos of what they know about the community, the history of the community, and we get them to talk about it, and we can see the passion in their voices, or hear the passion in their voices, and see in their faces how much this means to them. And we talk through that in a large setting, like there's hundreds of people usually in that setting. We have a microphone set up. We have them broken out into different groups. And the groups usually have one spokesperson so that it doesn't get too long. And then we talk about, okay, what are the things, the top 3 things that you want to see here, what's important. And so we go through different exercises at each one of these community engagement sessions that are fun and engaging to them. And I'm sure most of y'all have done this in some form or fashion in your engagement sessions. But what is unique, I think, to what we do is that we are actually specifically trying to draw out something that, number one, they didn't know that they needed or wanted, and number 2, a vision of the place that helps them dream and it helps them to get excited, about it. It's amazing what that does to or for a project. Instead of coming in and saying, this is what you need, folks, we know what we're doing, we've done this all over the country. You go in and you say, we're going to develop a vision together. What do you want your community to look like? What do you want this place to be for your community? And we go through that process with them, and we see them multiple times. They become friends. We develop a relationship with them, and they trust us. And that takes a lot. Before we got into that process, we knew it was going to take a lot, and so we negotiated fees and everything else to work that out, to travel to Houston multiple times, that sort of thing. But if you're authentic in your approach, they can read you and they understand what you're there for, and then they open up to you and really share this beautiful history that they have, and you can then interpret that and start to reflect that in what you're doing as far as design. So it's really getting them involved from the very beginning and letting them be involved all the way through the process at some form. Yeah, those are the tools we use. I would say communication. Nothing I guess that is like the lightning rod, but it's just, that's what we do. It's a process. It's not necessarily the tools that we use. It's just how we engage folks, I think. Yeah. But that was a great question. Thank you.
Teri, thank you so much for your time. This is very inspiring. I loved hearing everything, and thank you for taking time to engage with questions with people. You had some wonderful answers. And I wanted to thank everyone that showed up today. Thank you. And if anyone, I just wanted to remind everyone, if anyone needs any credit, I'm going to put the email that you send it out to for any learning units, if anyone needs that. With that, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Teri. Bye.
Bye-bye.